minus 30 seconds.
DeAndre Hopkins! Justin Jefferson, have a day! What a catch! C.D. Lamb! Only this guy, I think. I mean, maybe I'm trying to think of somebody else.
And he hurdles his way into the end zone. Touchdown.
I was scared for the interception
4,
by Kenny
3,
Moore.
2, 1, 0.
No, Mike. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome into the final drive. Josh Frey-Sam here with you once again. Week 16 edition of the final drive, ladies and gentlemen. Merry Christmas. Happy Boxing Day to everybody. An exciting day in the NFL today, especially the noon slate today. That was an exciting day in the NFL. We got 5 playoff berths were clinched today in the NFL. 4 in the NFC, 1 in the AFC. If today was any indication of how the rest of the NFL season is going to go, especially, well, the last 8 weeks of this season is going to go, then sign me up for that, man. I'm all in. I'm ready to go. This was an exciting noon slate for sure. We're going to break all that down for you guys. As usual, like I said, exciting show today. Thank you very much for joining us, talking Vikings once again today. Seems like we've been talking a lot about the Vikings over the past few shows or so, but we're going to be bringing in Matthew Coller from Purple Insider. And then also I got my guy Anuj Bhasker of the Falcons fandom. He's going to be coming in right now. He's waiting. He's loading. So let me bring him in right now. No stranger to the show, Anuj. What's going on, sir? How are you? How was Christmas? How was holidays? Happy holidays. Happy Boxing Day, man. How was Sunday watching the NFL, man? How are you as a whole?
It's been great, man. Merry Christmas. My Christmas was great. Great time with family. But yeah, great day of football today. A lot of great games. A lot of big things happened, but I had a fun time watching for sure.
No doubt, man. I gotta give you your flowers, man. I gotta give you your flowers because last time you were on here, I think it was week 12 you were on. We brought a refund. We talked more Vikings and stuff like that. So this is your second time coming on to talk about the Vikings with me. But you also said we were talking about the MVP race, and I think you might have mentioned Jonathan Taylor. But you not only mentioned him, but you also said I said maybe a guy who I could give it to is Aaron Rodgers right now. After I finished saying, I think I said Matthew Stafford at the time. You said Aaron Rodgers, and ever since you said that, man, Aaron Rodgers has taken it to what we saw last year, man. He's just on a different level right now than everybody else. And honestly, tomorrow when the betting odds come out, it's probably going to be Aaron Rodgers as the front runner for MVP. And as a Packers fan, man, I just wanted to say thank you. That's all I want to say to you.
Yeah. He's definitely the prohibited favorite at this point. It was kind of up to him and Brady after last week. And Brady, he didn't play bad today, but he didn't play too good. And obviously we saw what Aaron Rodgers did yesterday against Cleveland. So he's definitely the prohibited favorite, and I'm sure he's going to be the betting odds favorite as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. Let's quickly, we got a lot of things to go through today. This is a busy show, so let's take a quick look at the playoff picture for starters. We've been doing that the past few shows now, and just kind of break down what's going on here. So for starters, the Chiefs locked up the AFC West. This is before Sunday Night Football happened tonight, so in the NFC isn't going to be fully updated. The Dallas Cowboys are obviously now in the second seed, right behind the Green Bay Packers there. Like I said, all those playoffs, a lot of playoff spots got locked up in the NFC today. There's only 2 spots remaining, but the Chiefs locked up the AFC West today. The Rams clinched a playoff berth. The Bucks locked up the NFC South. The Cowboys have won the NFC East now, and the Cardinals have clinched a playoff berth. So Anuj, what I want to look at now is I want to ask you is the AFC still has 3 divisions and a total of 6 spots up for grabs. Who do you think is kind of who would you be most scared of in the AFC as it stands right now with 2 weeks left? I mean, there's 7 teams within 1 game of the 7th seed right now. And I'll pot this up for you just for reference. But who are you kind of most scared of as it stands right now?
And this is other than Kansas City, because they've already.
I mean, you could choose Kansas City if you want, but if you think Kansas City is kind of the obvious one, then absolutely go somewhere else.
Well, yeah, I'd say Kansas City's the obvious one. Other than them, I would go with Cincinnati. I would go Cincinnati because they've really come on in the second half of the season. We saw what they did today. Burrow went for over 500. T. Higgins almost 200 yards receiving. Their offense has really come on, and even their defense isn't that like it's a good defense. It's not great, but it's a serviceable defense. And I think they've kind of jumped ahead a year. I expected them to kind of come into their own next year, and they've kind of jumped the gun on the rebuild. So I'd say Cincinnati just because of the firepower they have on offense.
The NFC, and I absolutely agree with you in that sense. I said the Bengals last week on the show. I said if there's kind of another team, I asked my buddy Jesse, I said, am I crazy for thinking the Bengals? Like the only thing I could see standing in the Bengals way kind of thing is their inexperience. You know what I mean? Like Joe Burrow, I'm not going to lie to you. Joe Burrow stepped up in a big way today, and we're going to talk about him in just a second. Joe Burrow did step up. He did have that clutchness to him, but I'm not going to lie. I've watched a few games this season where Joe Burrow's needed to be come up in a clutch situation. He hasn't quite come up when needed in a lot of play. He's thrown a lot of interceptions, a lot of poorly timed interceptions this season. Today it was refreshing to kind of see him come up when he was most needed today. He absolutely balled out. Looking at the NFC though, it's been really top heavy in my opinion, but the Niners are kind of, say what you will about Jimmy G. I know a lot of people are kind of ragging on him right now, but the NFC or the Niners for me are kind of a team that maybe, I don't know if I want to play them. If I'm kind of a second, third seed, you know what I mean, in the wild card round, I'm not sure I want to play the Niners. You know, I don't know if I want to play any of these teams, but I don't know if I want to play. Yeah, but what I want to know is where do you stand right now on maybe the seventh seed as a whole in the playoff picture? Like, what's your stance even just on the formatting of this? Because the 1 to 6 for example in the NFC is really strong in my opinion. Then you got the Eagles at 7. Like, I mean, what's your thoughts on kind of like the 7 team format?
I mean, as a fan, I mean, for me, I think it's like the 7 seed. You don't like it until your team is the 7 seed and you love it. But
that's facts.
I'm not a big fan of the seventh team, adding in the 7th team, just because I mean, we've grown up with 6 teams, so I think that's just kind of natural. I'm sure we'll get used to it as time goes on. But yeah, I mean, like you said, that 1 through 6, the NFC is so strong, and you have that 7 seed, which makes the 2 seed so much more, what teams are playing for. Because it makes it a lot more important. Because I think Green Bay is going to lock up the 1 seed. I think they can lock it up next week, right? If they win.
Yeah, they got to win one of their last 2, and it'll be locked up.
Yeah, so that 2 seed is so coveted, and you're going to see all 4 the other teams fighting for that spot. So I guess it works in that standpoint.
No doubt. Man, let's move on to a kind of a new segment, if you will, here that I want to introduce this week, and it's called Have a Day. Basically, I told you about it. We're just going to throw 2 guys out, rapid fire kind of thing, who we thought had exceptional days. And this is where I wanted to bring up Joe Burrow. So I just want to bring up my first guy right off the bat, Joey B. And we talked about him in last week's episode with him possibly being the comeback player of the year. I said Dak Prescott and Joe Burrow is probably between them. My buddy Jesse said maybe even Nick Bosa could be a guy you could look at as well. I said, yeah, absolutely. He could be a dark horse kind of thing. I said Joe Burrow's arrow, in my opinion, is pointing a little bit more up than Dak's is. And Dak had a terrific game tonight. But Joe Burrow today, 37 for 46, 525 passing yards, 4 tugs, no picks, 143 passer rating, man. Third quarterback in Cincinnati history with 40 passing touchdowns in his first 2 seasons. And the fourth most passing yards in a single game in NFL history. So all that's to say, man, have a day, Joe Burrow. Who do you have give me both of your guys on terms of who do you have as a have a day today?
You pick Joe Burrow. I'll pick one of his receivers. I got T. Higgins. He's really come on in the second half of the season after Jamar Chase dominated the first half. Today, he was targeted 13 times, caught 12 of them for 195 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just an absolute monster day. And my second guy is Foye Oluokun of the Atlanta Falcons. Is that a little bit
Like
biased?
that.
Of course. I think I was one of maybe 10 people who watched Detroit and Atlanta play today, but he had a great game, 14 tackles. He's second in the league in tackles behind only Bobby Wagner, and also a game-winning interception at the end in the red zone to seal the victory. So those are my two.
I love that, man. I love that. And yeah, T. Higgins balled out, man. T. Higgins is a lot of guys in Cincinnati. They're trying to hope that maybe he can be an AJ Green, a second coming or something like that of AJ Green down
Definitely.
the line, man. The bottom line is they have a terrific kind of trio there in Cincinnati right now. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd, of course. Those guys are
all
balling
young
right
too.
now. All
Higgins
young
and
too,
Chase
man.
are going to be together for the next 4 years. At least.
It's scary, man. It's scary. It really is. Like if that's something, especially, and like you said, the young is kind of the key right now. Like they're just it's kind of scary to think what they might be next year or the year after that or something like that. But my final guy for have a day is going to be Isaiah McKenzie, the Buffalo Bills wide receiver. Stephon Diggs, yeah, he had a nice day, but no. Dawson Knox, no. Gabriel Davis was even out with COVID today. Isaiah McKenzie, who is primarily kind of a known for his punt returning skills. 11 catches on 12 targets today, $125 and a tug. He made some really tough, crucial, timely catches in today's game and was really leaned upon by Josh Allen. So shout out to Isaiah McKenzie. Have a day to you, sir. We got about 5 minutes time or so, man, before we bring in Matthew. So before then, how about let's transition over to Sunday Night Football really quickly and maybe break that down before we bring in Mr. Coller here to talk about the Vikings. This Sunday Night Football game, Dallas and Washington, was kind of a rout in every sense of the word. Not really necessarily. The NFL went on quite a run earlier in the season with just their primetime games. It seemed like every game, whether it was Thursday night, Sunday night, or Monday night, was just it was a banger. You know what I mean? Regardless of weather, regardless where it was being played. This game was a little bit of, if you're a Dallas fan, you loved it. Washington fan, not so much. Much closer game than 2 weeks ago. It was 42-7 at half for the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas now has 20 plus points in 5 straight games. Dallas is getting hot, man. They really are, and they're a favorite for a lot of people for that reason. The stars are playing like stars. On defense, you got Diggs, and you got D-Law and Micah Parsons, right? On offense, you got Zeke and all the 3 wide receivers and Dak. Everybody's balling out. What do you make of Dallas right now from the outside looking in, Anuj? Are you buying the hype on the Dallas Cowboys? Is there any reservations that you have as it pertains to the Dallas Cowboys?
I love the Cowboys. Their offense has struggled a little bit the last couple of weeks. Not that they've been bad, they just haven't been what they were earlier on in the season. And tonight they woke up and the defense continued to be the opportunistic defense that they've been pretty much all year.
No doubt.
A couple more picks, a pick 6 today. DeMarcus Lawrence got a pick 6. Trayvon Diggs got another pick. He has more picks than I think 12 teams by himself. So I love the Cowboys. I think the way that they play, the way that how good their offense can be, and how their defense forces turnovers, they're going to be a tough team to beat. I have questions about them in the playoffs because I don't think that they're going to be able to get 2 or 3 turnovers a game in the playoffs because you're going to be playing better teams. But I wouldn't be surprised if they made a run, though, for sure.
Yeah, they're one of those teams, right, where you just probably don't want to play them. I mean, you don't really want to play any of these teams in the NFC, but like Dallas is up there in terms of just the upper echelon of the teams. Is just you don't want to play. Now's the time. I think Chris Collinsworth said it perfectly in terms. Now's the time is where you want to start getting hot. You want to get healthy. The Dallas Cowboys are doing both of those, right? They're obviously missed Tyrone Smith, I believe, still on the left side of the line, but they're getting hot. They're getting healthy. One thing for me, my only reservation, and I never want to take anything away from what a NFL team has accomplished. You're playing in the NFL. You're beating NFL caliber teams. I don't care if you played the Jags, 5 weeks in a row, right? But I want to see Dallas play a playoff team. Like their strength of schedule, I think, has to be near the bottom of the league this year. They've played to this point. They've played 3 playoff teams this season. Okay. And their 4th, they'll be playing next week in the Arizona Cardinals. But their last 4 games, this time where we're seeing the Dallas Cowboys get so hot, has been against New Orleans, who does not scare me, Washington, New York Giants, and then Washington again. So Dallas, I just want to, like, I'm not going to discredit what they've done, but I just want to, in terms of seeing this team all the way buying into all this hype, I just want to see the Cowboys actually play a team. And next week, I think, is going to be that test, even without DeAndre Hopkins there. Next week is going to be that test for me against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, that's the statement. I think tonight was a little bit of a statement, putting up, a 50 burger, but next week is going to be kind of like that one for me. I just want to quickly go also over to Taylor Heineke. Where do you see him ceiling wise? Like, do you see Taylor Heineke? Like, I'm a big Heineke fan. He did not have a good game today. I thought that just the balls that he did throw were not very good. But where do you have him ceiling wise? Do you see him as just a kind of backup quarterback or a spot starter from here going forward, or what do you see him as?
I see him kind of as a game manager, somebody who won't necessarily lose you the game, but he won't win you a game necessarily. Like, you can win with him, but you'll also win in spite of him and lose because of him at times. Yeah, I don't see a ceiling, too high of a ceiling for him. But I don't think he's bad necessarily. He's shown signs of being a pretty good quarterback. I mean, he played great in the playoff game last year against Tampa Bay. Has had some impressive moments this year, including the I think it was an 11-minute drive against Tampa Bay to close that game out. So he's shown flashes, but I wouldn't say he's an upper echelon, or I don't think he'll become an upper echelon quarterback or anything like that. Maybe middle of the pack, something like that.
Yeah, that's totally fair, man. That's absolutely fair. Okay, let's bring in Matthew now, man. I'm ready to bring in our guest here. He's waiting. He's loading here. From Purple Insider. Without further ado, let me welcome Mr. Matthew Coller. Matthew, how are you doing, sir? Merry Christmas, Happy Boxing Day, man. How are you, man? And how's the holidays treating you?
I am good. I'm sorry if my internet's a little spotty here. We've got a storm going on in Minnesota. Not a surprising thing. So if you guys can hear me, okay.
You're good right now, man.
Other than that, also a storm of bad football by the Vikings today inside US Bank Stadium. It was the quietest I've ever heard the stadium. I think that fans have kind of worn out their welcome with this group, with the quarterback, head coach, general manager. And today was kind of the, like, hey, make or break. Like, if you beat the Rams and you play great, then hey, maybe you're a playoff team, and you should be. I mean, look at the other teams that you're going against in this race. Some of them are on their fourth string quarterback or playing Taylor Heineke and losing and giving up 56 points. Like, these are the teams you're in the race with. You should be able to beat them. And instead they get 3 interceptions gifted and still can't win. So I think it's a kind of a sad time for Vikings fans.
Yeah, and Matthew, on that note, man, we've got questions for you because this game was far from a QB duel. Like you mentioned already, 3 interceptions by Stafford, 4 interceptions, and this game was far from a QB duel. 4 interceptions in total in this game. Matt Stafford finished with a sub 50 quarterback rating. Kirk Cousins actually posted a decent quarterback rating, 93.6, but the Vikings were 2-12 on third down, and I'm not sure if that's going to be maybe one of your key takeaways from this game in terms of what contributed to the loss. But they, like you mentioned, won the turnover battle 3-1, but both teams struggled in the red zone here. So give us your analysis of this game. What was kind of the downfall, or the thing that you can maybe put your finger on as what happened here for the Vikings?
Yeah, just ineptitude on offense. I mean, half of those numbers for Cousins, the quarterback rating, the yards he put up, came when they were down by 14 points, and they were playing from behind the entire game. And at one point, the Rams very bizarrely took Jalen Ramsey off of Justin Jefferson, and immediately Jefferson gets a 34-yard catch and a couple other receptions. It was like, I don't know why you're doing this, Rams. They went into their prevent defense a little too early, I think. And then if you go into prevent against Cousins, he's going to find someone like Justin Jefferson. But those numbers are not reflective of Kirk Cousins' play today. It was a kind of a classic big game no-show from Kirk Cousins. It's one of the biggest things that he's been criticized throughout his career, and there's a reason for that. It's because it happens all the time. I mean, every year that he's been here, the December football, when it gets the most important, is often when Kirk Cousins has come up the smallest. Even going back to his first year, 2018, they play the Bears in week 17 to get in the playoffs. They lose that game when the Bears weren't even playing their starters. Even in 2019, when they made the playoffs, they had a big game against the Packers that was hyped up, and, oh, you've got a chance to beat the Packers and win the division. Complete no-show. And it was just, oh, look, he's doing that thing again. And look, it's not all on Kirk Cousins, not at all. Aaron Donald was great. Jalen Ramsey was mostly great. But when the other quarterback throws the ball to you 3 times and you come away with, I think, 10 points total off of that, and one of the interceptions was literally the 2-yard line for the Vikings, and so they just handed it off and walked right in. It's a lot of offensive ineptitude for them, and it's been that way most of the year. I mean, when you look at Cousins' overall statistics, they really don't tell the story of this offense on the whole. I think they were 12th best in points. That'll probably go down after today. It's been mediocrity. Sometimes they're real good. Sometimes they no-show for large portions of the game. And when the other team has a good defense, especially a good defensive line, Cousins just isn't athletic enough to make plays off of that. And when something goes wrong, like losing Adam Thielen early in this game, it just seems to completely throw him off. And we've seen it far too many times. And I think that when you look at win-loss records for quarterbacks, it's always a big debate. Like, oh, does it matter? Is he a winner? And all those things. And I guess Stafford has a case for that today. You get a 46 rating and get a W next to your name. But if you're asking why the Vikings have been mediocre for so long, I mean, that's part of the answer, is that there's this roller coaster of inconsistency with Cousins that has just happened year after year. And you get to the end and you need a big game out of him, and there's nothing there to be found. And so I think today it was very much could not escape the pressure of Aaron Donald, can't play make when he's thrown off schedule. They had the elite shutdown corner in Jalen Ramsey playing against Justin Jefferson. So they kind of took away that weapon, and they couldn't run the ball because Dalvin Cook was out. And then there you go. I mean, you have a quarterback that has the second highest cap hit in the NFL this year, who can't perform if you take away his running back. And that has often been the case. So I think that there's a lot of frustration from Vikings fans walking out of that game.
That's a great analysis, Matthew. Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to turn it over to Anuj here. Anuj, go ahead if you got a question for Matthew here on this one.
What do you see as the future of the quarterback position in Minnesota? I know, like you said, Kirk Cousins, a huge cap hit. I think his cap hit is around $45 million next year. And they don't have a lot of cap space. I think they're actually over the cap. What do you see as the future of that position? I know they drafted Kellen Mond in the 3rd round this year. I'm not sure what they think of him in the building, but me personally, I like them coming out of Texas A&M. But what do you think is the future of the quarterback position?
Yeah, I can tell you it's not Kellen Mond because he couldn't. Basically, he had the entire training camp to win the backup job and couldn't win the backup job. Sean Mannion is the backup quarterback. This was the first game Kellen Mond has been active all year as the backup, and that's because Sean Mannion went on the COVID list. And so, what we saw in training camp is a guy who is really nowhere close to being an NFL quarterback. And really, it's just not just, can he master an NFL offense, which is hard for anybody, but just even throwing the football is so erratic. And understanding just the technique of anticipating a throw and things like that are so far off with Mond that he might develop into being a backup and maybe someday a starter, but that day is not soon. I think that what we have is a major pivot point in the organization of, do you extend Kirk Cousins and risk signing yourself up for many more years of 8-9 or 9-8, because that's what he's been for his entire career. You now have a huge sample size of a guy who has 10 wins one time in his career with lots of good teams. Honestly, those Washington teams, because it's Washington, are always looked at like, oh, they were horrible, but they weren't. I mean, Sean McVay is their offensive coordinator in 2016, and Cousins puts up big numbers, but they go, 8-7-1, missed the playoffs on the final day. Does any of this sound familiar? I mean, they had Deshaun Jackson, they had Pierre Garçon, Vernon Davis, Jordan Reed was a really good tight end at the time too, and a great offensive line, and yet same results as they've gotten in Minnesota pretty much every year. So I think that at some point the ownership has to be getting tired of paying a single player 15 to 20% of their salary cap and getting these kind of results that, hey, if you started a regular, Taylor Heineke or something, how much different would the season be? Maybe one win different. That's not what you're paying for is being, only a win or two better. I mean, look at even Denver starts Teddy Bridgewater, the ultimate kind of bridge quarterback. They've got the same number of wins as the Vikings and the same record. That's not what you signed up for in 2018 to have this track record. And I've got to think that this is now a big enough sample size to say this just doesn't work. So the way that I look at it is, I think prudent move would be look at the teams that are desperate for quarterbacks in the offseason. New Orleans, Pittsburgh, teams like that, especially the Steelers make a lot of sense here. Try to get a first-round pick for him. If Carson Wentz can get a first-round pick, then Kirk Cousins most certainly can from a quarterback-desperate organization, and then move forward. I mean, this team, it has Justin Jefferson and other weapons. Irv Smith will be coming back at tight end. But when you look at the defense, go through those defensive players, there's most of the guys are not going to be here. They tried to rebuild their defense in 1 year. It didn't work. They're one of the worst defenses in the NFL. And their offensive line still has positions to be filled, as was obvious today, as Aaron Donald was ripping their heads off and rolling them around the field. And I mean, it's just like there are a lot of holes, and Adam Thielen is getting older. He's now been injured in 2 of the last 3 seasons. I mean, there's a lot to be done here, and it just makes a lot of sense to say you can draft a quarterback, bring them in, and immediately give them a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL in Justin Jefferson, start rebuilding your defense through the draft with a different coach, different general manager, different quarterback. I think that they've been in denial for several years, and a lot of fans have been in denial about where they are, but really 2019 was probably the last time they had a chance to win. And then they've just been kind of delaying the inevitable, which they're going to have to rebuild a large portion of this roster. So why would you keep Kirk Cousins here when you can't build the Super Bowl caliber roster around that cap hit? And he doesn't have the extra gear, the Mahomes gear, the Justin Herbert, the Joe Burrow, the next generation of players at the quarterback. So he doesn't have that gear that he can make up for those things that go wrong. So I think that if they're living in reality, they'll know they have to move on from him.
So Matthew, is this something that you see happens regardless? Like if the Vikings make the playoffs and let's just say they get bounced first round, do you think this is something that happens like regardless, or do you think this is something that happens if strictly only if they miss the playoffs? And I'm talking like you mentioned coaching changes, you mentioned possible like front office changes or something, quarterback changes, like are all these happen regardless, do you think, or is this strictly only if this is like a missed playoff opportunity for this team or a one and done?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's the question that we've been kind of asking for a while now. Is this team teeter-totters around 500? Is like, would they change their mind if you go down to Green Bay this week and beat the Packers and then, finish off with a horrendous Bears team and then go into the playoffs by some miracle of the football gods that everything falls your way? But as of right now, I haven't checked it since the Sunday night game, but 538, the statistics website was giving them a 10% chance to make the playoffs as of today. So at this moment, it just seems like it's very unlikely that they're going to get in. I mean, after today, do you think Aaron Rodgers is gifting them 3 interceptions next week at Lambeau with the fact that they still need to battle for the number 1 seed? I mean, it's just really hard to see for a team that struggled to get by the Bears, lost to the Detroit Lions a couple of weeks ago. Like, this is a bad football team. I think that people are finally coming around to this, that where I think a lot of us were who are covering the team maybe early in the season. Like this just doesn't look like we've seen good Vikings teams. This isn't one of them. But they lost some close games, so they talked themselves into it. But every team loses close games. They don't lose all the close games. Like it seemed like the Vikings were early in the season. And so, they can sort of hang their hat on, oh, we were close against this team or that team. Well, but when you look at the end of the day, what their point differential is, it's almost 0. That means you're mediocre. You're right in the middle. And right now they don't have some players, some injuries throughout the year. Adam Thielen's probably not going to play. It's just really hard to see. But should they, by some football god miracle, make the playoffs, I think that they still make major changes. Now that it might not include Cousins. If he were to play great, if he throws for 400 and outduels Rodgers, takes them into the playoffs, loses 38-35 against, I don't know, the Bucks or something, maybe they would change their mind. But to me, it would be, how do you change your mind after seeing all this still? Because in 2019, he won a playoff game, played better than Drew Brees in that playoff game, had a game-winning drive in overtime, and then came out the next year, went 7-9 as soon as the team, drifted off a little bit on defense and with the offensive line. And so it, like, you've seen this movie so many times before. And also the other thing is, like, what is the difference between, they have to ask themselves this, Kirk Cousins at 45 million for his cap hit, or if they even give him an extension, it's still going to be like 35. And one of the most expensive quarterbacks in the league, versus if you draft a guy and he's even just okay, say he's Mac Jones. Mac Jones is just okay, right? But he's really cheap. So what's the difference when you're still throwing to Justin Jefferson, which you'll have him under a rookie contract for the next couple of years? I think even if they make the playoffs and they lose in the first round, you have to do that calculus and also look at the rest of the roster and say, they're so top heavy with a couple of great players and then a huge drop off to the second level. So you could, that's what people will say is like, oh, look, they have Eric Kendricks and Harrison Smith and Justin Jefferson. It's like, right, but name me the 15th guy on the roster. And like you're getting to like replacement level players at that point. And so, I think that they need that. They really just need the money more than anything to start rebuilding this roster. But could ownership get sort of wowed by a late charge and then a playoff appearance and a great showing? We've seen it happen before. I don't want to count it out.
Yeah. No, that definitely makes sense, man. And yeah, you mentioned the close losses here. I always got to wonder like how much those contribute to the potential of like a coach firing. Like, I mean, the Vikings, I believe they lost their league worst 8th game this week by 8 points or less. And like, that's just, I mean, a lot of people could point to coaching for that. Some people could point to the execution late in the game. But at the end of the day, questions are raised when you have that poor of a record. My last question for you, Matthew, we'll get you out of here right away. But Justin Jefferson right now, obviously everybody knows about that guy. That guy's unreal. He's now has the most receiving yards by receiver in his first 2 seasons in NFL history, passing Odell Beckham Jr. Can you give the people who are watching maybe a guy that they don't know on Minnesota? You just mentioned, name me the 15th guy. Can you give us a guy, an under the radar guy who you maybe like on the Minnesota Vikings, who you maybe think is that up and coming guy who might make a splash in the coming seasons?
Yeah, I think this is actually part of the problem. Is it's very hard to do that because to tell you that I'm confident that player X, Y, or Z can be something special is pretty tough because they've just drafted really poorly in recent years. I mean, that's how you end up with a really thin roster. This kind of reminds me of, in some ways, when the New Orleans Saints sort of hit the skids there for a few years with Drew Brees. Not that Cousins is in Drew Brees' ballpark, but where the only way that they got out of that was by having this unbelievable draft where they got Lattimore and they got Alvin Kamara, where that seems like the only route out if the Vikings stay with Kirk Cousins. I mean, if I'm giving you a player that's sort of intriguing, I would say their 4th round pick, Kene Nwangwu, who's returned a couple of kicks for touchdown. Now teams are squib kicking and kicking away from him. And when he's gotten in on offense, he's been exciting. So if they eventually move on from Dalvin Cook a year or 2 from now, he kind of looks like the next guy in line, but there's always another running back in line, right? I mean, that is truly you've sort of hit on exactly the problem. Is they've had a lot of opportunities over the last 2 years with injuries and COVID and everything else for guys to step into roles and then just, take off, as you so often see in the NFL, like, oh, someone got hurt and now this guy is a Pro Bowler. We just haven't seen that, and the opportunities have been there so much. I mean, at defensive end, they lost both their starting defensive ends. Haven't seen anybody step up. They've drafted players, they've developed players, but not to the point where they can have like a deep roster. And I think if you're going to win with Kirk Cousins, you have to have a really strong, deep roster, and they just don't have it. I thought you were going to ask me how great Justin Jefferson is, and I can confirm, really good. He's really good. He is. And you know what? I feel bad for Justin Jefferson because he sort of alluded to some frustration about play calling today. And everybody's going to run with that. I mean, that's going to be everywhere tomorrow, I would imagine. Justin Jefferson, absolutely. Is he going to want out? Is he frustrated? And I would say, yes, he is, and he should be. And that's one of the reasons that they need to make changes, because Jefferson is the real deal. He's your franchise player, and you can't have him do the Stephon Diggs thing again and force his way out.
I think there's no doubt that the Vikings are going to be one of the big teams to watch in this offseason. Lots of potential changes, according to Matthew. Matthew, man, 100%. You've been super generous with your time, man. Thank you so much for all the insight you give us about the Vikings. One last thing, though, I do this with every guest. Give us a Super Bowl prediction, and then we'll get you out of here.
Well, I think Vikings fans would really dislike me for it, but I am going to say the Green Bay Packers are in the Super Bowl.
Appreciate you.
I'm going to say against the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, maybe it's too obvious, but I'm going to go with it.
Hey, man, I like it a lot. I like it a lot. Matthew, thanks again for your time, man. All best of luck the rest of the season. And thanks again for your time. And hopefully we can have you on again next season.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, take care, man. All right, Anuj, that was awesome. Matthew was yeah, he was a great guest, man. That was honestly, he gave a great in-depth, just a really good breakdown of what's going on there in Minnesota. I really appreciated that. Hey, let's go on. We got one other segment that we wanted to touch on, but quickly let's go to one other game quickly. Buffalo and New England, because this was arguably on paper the biggest game of the day in the AFC East. This was pretty much, in a sense, for the division. New England wins this game, they pretty much lock up the division. Buffalo wins it now, which they did. They control their own destiny, which they do. 33-21. This was a revenge game for the Buffalo Bills. They avenged their Week 13 loss to the Pats at home with a big dub here this week in Foxborough. Quick little anecdote here for you, Anuj. Bills are 11-1 in Josh Allen's career when he has 10 plus carries. And today he was 12 for 64 yards. 11-1, man. And this includes playoffs as well. So, and you want to talk about like the whole narrative of the Buffalo Bills not having a run game and just really depending too much on Josh Allen. I mean, when he rushes, when he is part of the running game, they are almost undefeated. They're almost unbeatable in that sense, according to the record and the numbers there.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, right. So, but this game came down to Josh Allen's arm. On that note, 30 for 47, 314, 3 tugs, no picks. Buffalo won the turnover battle, dominated time of possession in this game by really extending drives. They were 6 for 12 on third down. The Pats were only 1 of 10 in that area. Over 400 yards of offense in this game for Buffalo. Anuj, what are your takeaways from this game? Whether it's from the Pats' point of view, whether it's from the Bills' point of view, what are you taking away from this game?
It was very impressive for me because I haven't been that high on the Buffalo Bills this season. I just don't think they've really beaten anybody. Even when they beat the Chiefs, it was kind of when the Chiefs were kind of in like that awkward phase where they were kind of up and down. But this was very impressive. Josh Allen came out to play. Even when the Patriots brought it to a 5-point game, 26-21, that final drive, he made so many plays to make it a 12-point game. And from the Patriots perspective, I think, me personally, I jumped a little bit when they went on that long win streak. I was thinking maybe them going to the Super Bowl. Not to say that they're not a good team. I still think they're a good team. I just think that they're very they can only play one way, and that's with a lead. You can't really trust them when they get behind, and that's not really their fault. You know, they have a rookie quarterback. You can't really expect too much from him, even though he has played well this season. I think Mac Jones has a bright future, but I think the Patriots are still kind of a year or two away from being the Patriots again. But you know, I still think they're a good team. And I think Buffalo really showed today that they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in the playoffs. Even though I do think it's Kansas City's to lose. They're right there in the next tier for me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that assessment for sure. And like the Pats for me are a team that could definitely win a playoff game this year. I think that if their defense is clicking and Mac Jones has a nice game, whatever, they play their complementary type of game. I absolutely see the New England Patriots winning a game here in the playoffs this in January. The Bills were kind of my Super Bowl favorite, I believe, in the AFC to begin the season, if I'm remembering correctly. It was either the Bills or Kansas City Chiefs. I think it was the Bills though, and I'm kind of off that wagon now, kind of on your note that you just mentioned there. But like Josh Allen, I think that they just, I last year I had the concerns about them riding Josh Allen too heavy, right? Just riding his arm kind of thing. And this year it's really just, it's multiplied for me. I just don't love the fact that they're just leaning too heavy on his arm. And obviously it's a passing league, but they just, you saw I just mentioned the stat. They're 11-1 when he has 10 plus carries. And that's because that is some form of the running game that they are implementing.
That is their run game. They don't run
that right. That is part of their run game. Like, I mean, Singletary was their leading running back today. He was 12 carries for 39 yards. That was their leading running back. You know, Josh Allen actually led them in rushing today, and as he has done so many times in his career. But I'm kind of off that wagon for the Buffalo Bills now. Like I see them winning a playoff game. Maybe they even get to the AFC Championship, which would be huge for the organization again, right? But I don't know. Like I just see them faltering some. I just don't see them making the Super Bowl. And honestly, the thing that did it for me for the Buffalo Bills was Tre'Davious White losing, because losing Tre'Davious White, because you need the guy to cover. You need that lockdown corner. So important. And losing him was without a doubt their biggest loss of the year. And I think 100%. That it's almost more important for them to have Tre'Davious White than it is for them to have a running game. To be completely honest,
he's their best defensive player by far.
Seriously, you know, I don't know if you have any other comments on this game, or do you want to get into our final segment here?
I think I'm good. We can go to the next segment.
All right, man. Let's close this. Let's close this thing out. Let's talk about whose job, from a coaching perspective, whose job is in jeopardy here with 2 games left in the season. We're talking about coaching carousel. What would you, and also not only whose job is in jeopardy, but what would you do if you were the GM here? So I want you to maybe give me 3, 4, or who do you think, whose job is in jeopardy for you right now as it stands?
Off the top of my head, the obvious ones are Matt Nagy. I think that one's kind of been rumored for a long time now. I think he is going to get fired once the season's over. At least they should. I think they should get a new GM.
There was rumors of him getting fired at Thanksgiving, right after that Thanksgiving game. That never happened.
That's what I heard. That's right. I thought he was going to get fired after that game, but then they didn't do it. But I got him, Joe Judge, even though I did see today that they're most likely going to keep him for next year.
Right.
Vic Fangio in Denver. I just think he's just not the right coach for that team. They're a very young team. I think they need a younger coach, kind of like what Cincinnati did with Zach Taylor, kind of like that sort of a younger voice in the locker room. Also, when we just talked about the Vikings, Mike Zimmer. And I don't even think Mike Zimmer is necessarily a bad coach. I think they just need a fresh start. The organization just needs a fresh start all around. So I'd probably say those 4, I would say off the top of my head are, and you obviously have Jacksonville too. But we know that. With
Bevel. Yes. I agree with all those. I got all those guys written down. And I think it's very interesting you mentioned Vic Fangio. I kind of am curious to know, Vic Fangio was kind of on my hot seat entering the year. And it was kind of one of those things where, okay, what do the Denver Broncos need? Like the Denver Broncos, in my opinion, needed to either A, have a winning record and still miss the playoffs for him to keep his job, or B, they got to make the playoffs. You know what I mean? Like there's for him to keep his job. And so if they're hovering around right now, kind of where a lot of people might have expected them to, around this 500 mark, Vic Fangio's job certainly has to be up in the air. And they have a decent defense, right? They have the talent on the defensive side of the ball. The defense isn't quite the problem. It's just that ever eluding quarterback for the Denver Broncos that seems to be the problem. Like, I mean, if you stick Russell Wilson in this offense, right? I mean, next season,
they have the skill position. They have skill positions too. Javonte Williams is a great running back. Sutton, Judy, Noah Fant. They have everything you need. It's just that one position. They just don't have it.
Absolutely. I'll tell you one thing too. You mentioned Javonte Williams, and this is a little bit biased for me because he was without a doubt my favorite running back coming into this year's draft class. Same. But Javonte Williams, if you want to talk about a guy for fantasy football next year, man, that's your dog, man. Like, he's going to be a straight workhorse. I think Javonte Williams got to be a top 10 pick next year.
He leads the league in yards after contact or broken tackles, and he splits carries with Melvin Gordon. So you can only imagine what he's going to do once they can get off Gordon.
It's unreal, man. And I'm a big fan of Javonte Williams. Other guys that I had on this list, Pete Carroll with the Seattle Seahawks. I want to know
that's an interesting one.
If Russell Wilson leaves, is Pete Carroll just right behind him? You know, like I don't know. Like there's the whole debate. Is it Russ? Is it Pete? You know, who's responsible for this? It's kind of almost like that Belichick Brady kind of like who's responsible for the success or whatever, blah, blah, blah. There's a little bit of tension, obviously a little bit of animosity, it seems like, with Russ and the organization. So Pete Carroll, I think is has to be on, at least on the hot seat. And then I also have Matt Rule with the Carolina Panthers. As much of a fan as I am with Matt Rule and what he has done in the draft, in his first 2 drafts as a head coach, I thought he's had phenomenal drafts. But the thing, and then that's kind of a benefit of hiring a college coach. But as far as the actual coaching aspect of things, doesn't quite seem to be translating there for him. The last guy that I'll mention is Rich Bisaccia with the Las Vegas Raiders. And I think that's an interesting name because, like, I don't know. And this is where we can maybe kick this off with the what would you do? Do you think if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, like the Raiders are in the playoff hunt right now, like if they make the playoffs, are you kind of are you taking it down with Rich Bisaccia? Like, are you getting rid of him or keeping him on maybe as the special teams guy? Are you bringing a new coach? Are you just going to keep him, let him ride as the head coach?
I would definitely consider it because we all know how much has happened in Las Vegas this year. They've been an absolute mess all around.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're still in it is very impressive to me. And it really stems to the culture that Bisaccia has built there in his short time there. But if I was ownership, I would probably go for a new guy just to kind of refresh the whole team, I guess. Somebody like Byron Leftwich. He's my favorite coaching candidate going into the offseason. I feel like he should be sought after by a lot of teams. A lot of teams that I mentioned, Chicago, Las Vegas, or Jacksonville. I think those three should all go after Byron Leftwich. But yeah, if I was Las Vegas, I would go after a new guy. But I wouldn't blame them for sticking with Bisaccia if they did do that.
Right. Do you think there's other guys like, I mean, Joe Judge is safe, but I mean, Matt Nagy you mentioned is gone, but Seattle Seahawks, that's a huge team. I mentioned Pete Carroll. Like, what do you think? What are you doing? Like, I mean, I'm personally, I think if Russ is gone, I think you have to move on from Pete Carroll as well. Like, I just think that it's just a total blow it up at that point. You know, you have DK, you have a couple of interesting pieces here and there, I guess, but Seattle's just not, I'm not a big fan of Seattle, but like, I mean, if Russ is gone, I think if you are dealing your franchise quarterback, you're going to obviously get a slew of picks in return. You're obviously going to get a huge return rate. I think maybe just blow it up, man. Like, that's my opinion. What's your opinion what scenario do you think Pete Carroll loses his job? And then in that case, you know, what scenario do you think Pete Carroll will lose his job?
I don't know, because I feel like Pete Carroll's at a point in Seattle where, like, I don't know how the fan base feels about him but from the outside looking in, I feel like he's at that point where, like, he'll leave, like, on his own terms.
Grandfathered in, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like he's kind of like one of those guys that's just he's gonna be gone once on his own terms and not the team firing him. Yeah. But I mean, what you're saying makes sense. I mean, just blow it up. Because yeah, like if you lose Russ, I mean, how old is Pete Carroll? He's in his 70s?
He's old. Yeah.
60s, 70s. So I mean, it makes sense to move on, but I feel like it'll be a mutual party. It'll be a mutually parting ways instead of just them firing him.
Yeah, and on that note too, the reason why I'm saying that is because, I mean, if you send Russ away, right, you're obviously going to get a bunch of picks like I mentioned and whatnot. I don't know if you're going to get another quarterback, maybe a holdover quarterback in the meantime for you to draft another quarterback. But the reason why I'm saying this because, and this is going to kind of segue into my candidates here. You know, you have guys, you mentioned Byron Leftwich. One of my favorite candidates this year, Brian Daboll. I thought he was going to have a job last year. Brian Daboll, Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator, the job that he's done with Josh Allen as a quarterback, developing him. And Josh Allen came into the league. A lot of people know this. Josh Allen came into the league with the lowest floor of any of those quarterbacks, Josh Rosen, Baker Mayfield, that group, right? Lamar Jackson. But he had, according to a lot of people, the highest ceiling. And Brian Daboll has got that out of Josh Allen. You know what I mean? This is a perennial MVP contender now. So if you can get, let's just say Seattle loses Russ. I mean, why not bring in Brian Daboll with a slew of picks to go and grab a new quarterback, develop that quarterback into your guy, right? Like, I mean, that's just my opinion. I think that's a possibility. I think Brian Daboll needs to be sought after by, kind of like you mentioned already, with young quarterback teams, Jacksonville, Chicago. I think Brian Daboll needs to be one of the top guys. Do you have any other candidates in mind who you think need to be on the watch list?
Well, we say it every year, but Eric Bieniemy, I mean, it's been 3 years. It should be only a matter of time before he gets a job, right?
You'd hope. You'd hope.
Yeah, you would hope so. I mean, he calls plays in Kansas City. He's helped in the development of Patrick Mahomes. I don't really know what else he can do to get a job.
There was the argument last year. There was the argument last year that he was a poor interview, and then who's the Colts? No, the Eagles. Who's the Eagles head coach again?
Nick Sirianni.
And then Nick Sirianni came into that opening press conference, and he was just like babbling. He was just completely babbling. He had no idea, and it might have been just nerves from the media or something like that. But a lot of people were like, if Eric Bieniemy was a bad interview, like, how did you hire Nick Sirianni over this guy? You know what I mean? But keep going. Eric Bieniemy, absolutely.
Yeah. Other than that, Kellen Moore, maybe. I know. I'm like what I said about who was it? I said about Denver. I feel like Denver could be a cool spot for Kellen Moore, a younger guy.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'd say Kellen Moore, Eric Bieniemy, Leftwich. Those are my top three, I'd say. And you said Brian Dable. And defense, I don't know about a lot of defensive-minded coaches that are out there. I mean, Todd Bowles is out there if he wants to be a head coach. If somebody wants to give him a shot again, but
I think Todd Bowles will eventually get his shot once again. I think he will. I'm gonna say from the offensive standpoint, just to round that out real quick, Mike Kafka, the quarterback coach in Kansas City as well. Again, for this kind of similar reasons as Eric Bieniemy. Now, this might be more like there's levels to it, right? Where Eric Bieniemy, if he goes, then Mike Kafka will just assume the offensive coordinator role, and then he'll get his opportunity after that. But I mean, we've seen wide receiver coaches and Joe Judge get hired, right? We've seen other quarterback coaches get hired as well for jobs as well. So, I mean, it's not a stretch to think that Mike Kafka, the Kansas City quarterback coach, gets hired for.
But if Kafka gets fired, if Kafka gets a job and Bieniemy doesn't, then we have a real problem.
Then we definitely have a problem. Yes, we absolutely do. And then the last guy I want to mention is Nathaniel Hackett, my guy in Green Bay, offensive coordinator for Green Bay. Nate Hackett.
He was rumored last year for Atlanta's job.
Yes. And I mean, he actually also has ties to Jacksonville as the former offensive coordinator for the Jaguars. So maybe, I don't know how they left off that relationship, but maybe he comes back in as the head coach. I have no idea. On the defensive side of the ball, to answer your question, just maybe to round the episode here, man, Matt Eberflus, the Indianapolis Colts defensive coordinator, Dennis Allen, the New Orleans Saints defensive coordinator, and then actually one last offensive coordinator under the radar guy that I'm kind of a fan of is Joe Lombardi, I think grandson of Vince Lombardi. He's the Los Angeles Chargers offensive coordinator, and he's paid his dues. He's done a lot of time with the New Orleans Saints. I believe he did some time with the Chicago Bears as well. But he was primarily under Sean Payton, learning from one of the best in the game. And now he's kind of running his own show over there with Los Angeles and Justin Herbert. Obviously, today's showing on offense wasn't the greatest against Houston for his case on his resume there. But Joe Lombardi, I think, is an under the radar guy who people need to keep an eye on. For sure. Yeah, man. Okay. I don't think there's anything else I need to mention, man. I think that we covered a lot of ground there in this. This was a thick episode, man. Anuj, I want to thank you very much, man, for the time, man. You've been generous with it and coming on to show a second time, and we'll be sure to have you on again next season, man. But I guess we'll see where your Falcons end up as the season comes to a close here.
Not in the playoffs, I'll tell you that.
Not in the playoffs, man. We'll see. We'll see what happens with the old Falcons. Actually, you know what? Let me get your quick thoughts on this. Kyle Pitts, were you okay with that pick?
I wanted Justin Fields.
Yeah,
I mean, we haven't known each other too long. I've been a Justin Fields fan since I was in high school, and he was in high school. So I was very biased with that pick. But I wouldn't say I'm mad about Kyle Pitts because he broke the franchise record for receiving yards for a tight end today. He'll most likely break the all-time rookie record for a tight end. I think he needs about 120 yards, 130 yards to break it, and they have 2 games left. So I assume he'll break it. I wouldn't say I'm mad about the pick. He's been great. They don't use him as much as I feel like they should, but he's been great. Can't really complain about it. But
yeah,
I think they needed to set them up. I think they needed to set themselves up for the future.
That's fair. Yeah, and I agree with you. I thought Justin Fields was the pick there by a mile. Like I've ragged on the Cincinnati Bengals about their pick of Jamar Chase over an offensive lineman who I thought Rashawn Slater would have been the pick there. But I mean, Jamar Chase has obviously kind of shut me up with that one in a convincing fashion there. But the Falcons are kind of right behind them in that sense for me in terms of the team that I've been ragging on. Like Kyle Pitts, I just did not think was the pick there. Like obviously he's a complete freak. It's tough not to pull the trigger on him there, but there was just so many more needs for the Falcons. Like, well, I don't understand why. I figured Justin Fields was just a match made in heaven, like a Georgia boy. Why not just go back home
from
and
Atlanta? Everything it just matched. It was perfect, and
it was perfect. It was perfect, man. Like I just or an offensive lineman for that matter. I didn't care. Like just a tight end was just, in my opinion, not the way to go. But anyways, that's not our job. I just want to get your thoughts on that as an Atlanta Falcons fan. I haven't asked a Falcons fan that question yet. But Anuj, appreciate you, man. Have a good night. Enjoy the rest of the holidays, man, and take care of yourself.
Thank you for having me. Had a great time. Hope to come on next season if you'd have me.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Thank you very much to everybody watching the final drive. We will see you next week for the week 17 edition. New guest co-hosts, new guests, all the whole shebang, man. So be sure to tune into that. Thanks very much. Have a good night.